Episode 76, HooperCast. We have been silent for a few weeks, as you may have noticed. A lot of things were happening for me and Dustin, separately, of course, not together. We're not a couple, I promise. Just it kind of delayed us being able to record, which is good news in the real world because that means we're busy. Bad news for you guys because then you don't have us to listen to. So here's episode 76, just us talking about the Avengers Age of Ultron. And the Avengers Age of Ultron Quicksilver is better than the X-Men Days of Future Past Quicksilver. I didn't mention this in our discussion, but that's the case. End of story. Well, hi, Dustin.
Hello, Hooper.
Welcome to the HooperCast, everybody.
Yay.
We've been away for a little bit. Some stuff was going on. I was on vacation. Dustin was not on vacation, but he had no time for you.
Correct. I don't make time for people in my personal life.
Although one of our waiters on the cruise ship was from Indonesia, and I came this close to asking him, like, "Have you heard of the HooperCast?"
Have you? Oh, that would be crazy.
Perchance, and he'd be like, "Oh my God, are you him?"
You're Hooper?
Oh my God, please. Here,
Can I get your autograph?
Take my watch.
Let me take a selfie with you. I'll put it on Instagram.
Yeah. So I know we're a little behind, maybe. We're as up to date as we have the resources to be in bringing you our thoughts on the Avengers Age of Ultron. We're recording this on May 5th, the Tuesday after the United States or the North America release. I've seen the film twice. Dustin, I think you've seen it once.
I have, just once.
Okay. And so we're going to kind of bring you our condensed thoughts because Dustin and I could talk for hours about this film.
We really could.
So I guess just a brief rundown of the plot. If you've been keeping up with the Marvel films, you sort of know the context of what's going on. If you haven't been, essentially what's happening is the Avengers have found this area where Hydra is operating, essentially, just to dumb it down, and where they still have Loki's scepter from the first Avengers film. And in the course of raiding this compound and all that, they uncovered this. Here's the only thing I'm lost on. Because they established that Bruce Banner and Tony Stark have been toying with the idea of creating like this global peace initiative, this peacekeeping robot, this idea of Ultron, and that they decided there's no way we could ever do this. It's just too complex. But then something about the compound changes that. And is it something they found in Hydra's computers? Is that what we're meant to understand?
I think it was. I think it had to do with Loki's staff or his scepter. That by analyzing that for a few days before Thor takes it back to Asgard, they're able to crack some sort of something in there
because of the stone. Okay, that makes sense. So essentially, that's what they try to do. Long story short, it goes wrong, and Ultron, the being that's created from this artificial intelligence, decides that in order to bring peace to the world, he would have to wipe out the Avengers and, I guess, more on a macro level, humanity. Arguably the film's biggest plot hole for me, just because then by eradicating humans, you're eradicating the people that you're trying to save from war by essentially waging war. And of course, that's why he's a villain and blah, blah, blah. And I get that that's the most efficient way, or the quickest, the surest way to wipe out war and create peace is to eradicate human beings. But it's a little too two-dimensional of a doomsday plot. But basically the Avengers will have to fight him and his resources throughout the film. We're introduced to two new characters, Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. Three, yes.
And the Vision.
Yeah, and the Vision. This is a spoiler-filled podcast, just so you know. But to be fair, the Vision's in the marketing. He's on a poster.
He's in the posters.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we're introduced to him as well, and all three characters of whom turn out to be good people. Thank God, by the end of the film. But I was correct in assuming, by the way, that Pietro and Wanda would begin at least as antagonists.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I noticed throughout the things I'd seen, you don't see them with the Avengers very often. I wonder if they're bad, and they were, and then they turn out to be good and stuff. Yeah. So, I guess overall, I'll just give my quick sum up thoughts, and we can get into the nitty gritty. I really enjoyed this film. I tried to keep my expectations low. I couldn't keep myself from watching trailers, but I tried not to watch the most recent ones more than once. That first one, I watched it like 10 times. I loved it. But I tried not to watch the stuff that was sooner and that had more finished effects and stuff. Because after you see the film, you realize some of those shots in that first trailer, that because they're unfinished shots, they thereby don't give away context of where they take place. Like, you don't realize that her screaming in that first trailer is after her brother dies.
Right, exactly.
And that she's surrounded by robots. You're just like, well, I don't know what's going on with her. She seems upset.
Yeah, exactly.
So it helps. It provides the tone without giving away details. So I appreciate that. But I was very much enjoying this film. I thought that most of the events and the motivations made sense, and the only things that didn't to me were things that I learned were cut for time, so that half excuses it. I mean, you can't fully excuse it because it's still, the film as it is incoherent without the pieces.
Exactly.
But you don't fault them creatively because they thought of it and they just had to cut it.
Exactly.
But I was very satisfied with the amount of action in the film. There's like 2 or 3 times the amount of action scenes in it. And I think the film overall is much better paced than the first one. The first one's meadows were very long and kind of sleep-inducing.
It's true. And
this one has much more dispersed action beats, and they deliver just on every scale. So overall, I'd give the film a thumbs up. But if you look too closely at it, as Dustin will demonstrate, there are problems that are familiar to Marvel. I think you'll be sad if you haven't seen this film. I think you'll be satisfied with it. But if you're going to come out with if you want the full package, like entertaining and makes 100% sense, you won't get that.
Sure.
So,
and for me overall, I think that it's not unwatchable. I think it's a lot of fun. I think to me though, it's a Saturday morning cartoon kind of fun. It doesn't do anything to me that is deep enough to really warrant its live action presentation. And with this caliber of performers, I feel like they were underused a lot of the time. I think back to, and I thought about this during the film, towards the end of the 1990s Spider-Man cartoon, Spider-Man kind of teams up with Captain America, Iron Man to defeat the Red Skull, and it's a little more Avengers-oriented. This reminded me a lot of that, just in terms of there's a villain, he's going to do some bad stuff, we have to stop him, but no one's really going to change or learn anything new. And to me, this illusion of change is a terrible thing for comic books and a terrible thing for comic book films. And I felt like it was just kind of wrought. This film was wrought with the illusion of change rather than the actual changing of character or character arcs in general. And just as an example, if we look at something like what I think the best of the MCU is Captain America: Winter Soldier. So Winter Soldier, the world at the beginning of the film is very different from the world we see at the end of the film. At the end of the film, S.H.I.E.L.D. is dismantled, Nick Fury's sort of in hiding, Captain America's unemployed. I mean, this is a very different world, and it makes it feel like, A, a complete film, and B, like it was worth my time because things are now different. Things are now, in some big ways and in some small ways, gonna have ramifications from here on out. And I felt like at the end of Age of Ultron, you see the characters kind of bantering back and forth, similar to the way they were at the beginning. The world didn't really seem different. We have a new headquarters, but again, that's an illusion of change. It's not an actual progression of these characters as individuals. And so for me, I think that was sort of the biggest thing, but we can talk more about some of the other issues too. I do want to talk about the things that I do like. I think, like I said, it's a fun movie. It's got some great action sequences. I think some of the character voices are more refined this time. And you get some really cool moments like with this sort of jokey kind of Thor, this sarcastic kind of competitive Thor I enjoy a lot. I think it gives Chris Hemsworth room to stretch his wings a little bit and then also kind of become a memorable part of the Avengers as a team. And there's plenty of great things that are done. The party scene where they're just kind of hanging around trying to lift Thor's hammer. These kind of like dialogue-y, hey, we're best buds kind of scenes are really, really cool to me and really set it apart from the first Avengers and also a lot of the MCU as well. So there's plenty to enjoy here. But I'm going to warn you now, I'm going to be a little more critical throughout this review than Hooper will be. But that's what makes the world go round.
We do.
Yeah.
Just us.
We do. Just us. Forget geocentric and heliocentric. It's Hooper-centric.
I would say in terms of character, I think Stark and Captain America probably get the least amount to do character-wise in this.
Yeah.
Stark kind of gets to play with maybe the guilt that this happened, but I never really feel that.
No, I never do either.
And I don't know if that's on Robert Downey Jr. or if it's on Joss or if it's just on we can't stop and focus on this right now.
I think I wouldn't put it on Robert Downey Jr. because I think
you could see it in that look in his first vision of everyone dead. You could see it in his face that he was completely capable of conveying this terror, this horrible weight.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And he's proven himself to be a phenomenal actor, so I have no doubt that if they had given him the proper, the proper direction, or even just, if you want to blame the writing, I think Robert Downey could have pulled it off.
And I'm hoping there'll be much more of that in Civil War and maybe in Infinity War.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think that's the natural place to take his character next is guilt. It's just guilt,
Yeah.
Because you saw that in the first Iron Man.
Yeah, you do.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's his whole reason for doing what he's doing, really, is guilt.
Yeah.
And, I want to make things right. And that's my parents are dead, so.
And I agree about the Thor progression because I like that they've progressively integrated him into human culture. Obviously, the first Thor movie, he's completely fish out of water. And then, in the second one where he's he just things as simple as I know what a car is and which side to get in on if I'm not driving and how and not to be freaked out by how it works and whatever. And to this one, having more of a developed sense of humor and a way of talking and a lot more just jovial,
a lot more human.
And I like that. Yeah, exactly. So I know that's where they wanted to go with him, and I like that they've made him a little more accessible in that way.
Yeah, I agree.
I really love the Hawkeye stuff.
Yeah. That's one of the things I really love too.
Yeah, I like that they gave him that kind of stuff, and that sort of explains his absence in certain scenarios within the universe, and also explains the way he operates. He's I think I read him talking about it, and he'd said he's not a company man like Captain America is. He's sort of a team player because he kind of has to be. It's his job. Right. Where he's not all in gung ho like Captain America because he has attachments,
other responsibilities.
And I love that they made it seem the whole time like he was going to die.
Yeah, they did. They really did.
Yeah.
The guy behind me kept going, "Oh, he's going to die. Oh, he's going to die." Throughout the whole movie. And at the end, whenever he does not, I wanted to turn around and go, "You were wrong. You were wrong," but I didn't. But no, I agree. But here's the weird thing now, and I'd have to go back and watch it. Do you think now that we know Clint's, sort of personal life a little bit, do you think that it's going to make it weird, the scenes between him and Natasha in the first Avengers that were subtly flirty, maybe? And
I think those can be completely repurposed as being like a best friendy kind of thing. Because I remember looking at them thinking, this could be brother sister, but I can tell they didn't go in that. Or sorry, this could be like romantic, but I can tell they're not diving into that direction, and I'm wondering why. Well,
here's my second question then, and something that I thought was sort of proof that there was a romance between the two of them was Natasha's arrow necklace that she wears throughout Winter Soldier, which is now going to seem a little scandalous. But I don't know. Why would she have an arrow necklace if not for a romantic?
She's a fan of the Hunger Games, man.
Oh, it's a Katniss thing.
Yeah. She's just
okay.
She's into the
novels.
Sense.
Makes sense. She loves the Hunger Games and Arrow and Legolas.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess those are subtle signs of we don't quite know what we want to do with him yet. Which was sort of evidenced by the first Avengers. So not only did they owe him more of a storyline and survival of this film's events, that ultimately makes him a more interesting character. So
I think you're absolutely right, and it certainly makes him more accessible and kind of in a way like that character that we could be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like he's the most like us.
Right.
Him and Black Widow are I mean, especially for me, like I understood. Not that it's hard to understand, but I mean, I'm married, I have a kid, and when you think about, man, the kind of stuff that this guy goes through in his day-to-day life and what he has to lose if he fails,
he carries with him,
that puts a whole new meaning to the risks he takes as an unpowered individual.
Yep.
That's a pretty big deal. And, if you go back and look at the other films and you just think, like, how many times... I mean, he's shooting arrows from the top of a building and then he jumps and fires one that's like a grappling hook and swings into a lower floor. Yeah. Man, if he'd eaten popcorn before that and his hand would slip, he's dead, and his wife grows up with... His children grow up without a father.
Exactly.
And it's that adds way more tension to just, well, it's just some dude, hired hand... I mean, he knew the risks when he took it. I personally, I can tell you, I take careful steps getting off of ledges. I started doing that once I saw that kid break his ankle in college when he was jumping off that loading dock. You remember what that did? Remember that look on my face?
Yes, I do.
I was like, that's pretty easy to pop your bone out of socket. Yeah. And so when you have a kid and you have all this other stuff, you sort of just...
think twice.
Yeah, well, some would call it like you sort of soften up and become less... I don't want to say, for lack of a better word, cool or daring or valuable or something to others. But you take less risks because you start to see your limitations and you have people who depend on you. And, he has a lot of land. That costs a lot of money, so he's got to be around.
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, his shed is bigger than my house. So,
I know, right?
Anyway, my whole point is, I really loved the Hawkeye stuff, and a lot of people did not like that they gave him Linda Cardellini as a wife and some kids instead of him hooking up with Black Widow.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was,
and I think some people are upset that they had Black Widow, this romantic thing with Bruce Banner,
which to me makes sense.
People were dogpiling on Joss Whedon because that's how you know Nerd Rage is not to be taken seriously, because Joss Whedon, one of the most outspoken people in the industry for women heroes and all this stuff, they're like, you're a misogynist and blah, unblock me and fight me. Like I saw one of them said that, and I was like, have you looked at his other work? And
do you understand at all what he stands for?
And honestly, like if there's any lack of story with Black Widow, first of all, you can blame that on how they started her out. They didn't really give her a strong chance out of the gate. And And they have every opportunity to do more interesting stuff with her. And if they're not taking it, don't really blame him. You can't really blame Marvel, and you can't really blame Scarlet or anybody. It's just, there's stuff with Black Widow, but I don't know, what is there to explore with her that's more complicated than the guilt of being an assassin and and frankly, they took her character towards her natural progression, because if you follow her arc, she's become less of like a killing machine and more of a human being. And toward the end of Cap 2, her whole thing is, I'm just a pawn for other people's missions, and I never made a free choice. And so in this movie, she's exploring the idea of maybe I don't have to be. I mean, S.H.I.E.L.D. is dismantled. I don't have to do this. Yeah. And I want to run, and neither does Bruce, and I want to run away with him. So while it seems to some people like this whole, like, you know, misogyny-driven thing where she's going to depend on a man, I think she's established she's not dependent on people. She's not a damsel in distress. You've established her as a strong female, but you establish her as a woman who has goals, and now her goals have changed and she wants them. And I guess because her goals include a romance with a male, that somehow makes Joss Whedon an asshole.
Well, this is a whole branch of feminism that believe that in order for a female character to be strong, she cannot have romantic feelings toward a male, because that undermines her singularity or her ability to operate on her own. And I don't think that that's true, because everybody wants somebody. Yeah. Like I've yet to meet somebody who goes, you know what, I'd rather probably just die alone. So that makes it relatable. Yeah. And who cares if it just happens to be with a man? I mean, anyway, and I like her whole thing with Bruce Banner. I think it's adorable, and I do too, and I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I also like that that doesn't come completely to fruition at the end of the film. Yeah, it's not like in one movie they fall in love and run off into the sunset. Exactly. It's sort of this underlying established thing. I think they moved into it a little quickly, but that's only because the two of them don't have standalone films.
Exactly.
So you establish with the whole lullaby thing that they've established this connection.
Which by the way, I love that lullaby thing because it would be very easy for them to use someone like, Captain America to do something like that, like let me talk you down. Mm-hmm. But to ask like an assassin to do it, like to me is an interesting.
Well, and it sort of implies there's a point to why they ask Widow to do it. Yeah. She's the one who can most effectively get through to him. Mm-hmm. And that means something. That has value.
Exactly.
So
I think it was a good choice. I have no problem with it.
I want to talk about Ultron and his plan.
Okay.
I'm going to point out one thing I'm sure you're going to bring up, but I'd like to get it out of the way. His plot, I realized through another podcast, is the same plot from G.I. Joe Retaliation.
It is.
And as soon as I made that connection, I was like, oh no, now I know how Dustin feels about the movie, because we agreed not to talk about it. And then I heard that, I was like, uh-oh, I know where he's going. I know where he's going to go.
It's true.
But can I say for Ultron that he is performed brilliantly.
Oh yeah,
by James Spader. Doubt about that. Love his creepy voice.
Yeah,
and I love how he was written, and I just love his. I love it. I loved it. I loved how he was performed. Now,
I did too.
I'd like you to talk about how you feel about him as a villain, effectively, like in the overall scheme.
Okay,
like his usefulness in the narrative.
Okay, so we can start off where he's created, right? So literally he's created and becomes evil in about the span of 45 seconds. Just through literally...
Before you even see him on screen.
Yeah, it's audio only, like conversation between James Spader and Paul Bettany, just talking back and forth, and then he becomes evil. I guess because he looks at some footage of war and murder, I guess, and he's like, oh, well, I guess I need to do something about this. And so he does. But to me, that does not... It's very hard for me to latch on to a character, which I know he's a villain, but you still have to be able to connect with him and understand him and even if you don't want him to succeed, you have to understand his motivations. And for this, I don't really quite understand his motivations. I mean, I understand them on paper, but I don't really understand them in terms of how did he get there? I mean, he's created, and he's like looking through files on all the Avengers, and he's like, okay, so here's some people, and they're trying to do some stuff, and in my opinion, they're hurting the world's, ability, humanity's ability to evolve. Let me do something about that. Okay, I'm done.
You know what could have stopped him? If he had just watched like some cat videos, been like, this is all right. They're pretty good.
Oh yeah, I like these cats.
I mean, as long as they keep making these, I'm okay.
I need to go buy a couple cats.
Yeah,
and he just becomes like a cat robot lady.
I was gonna kill you guys, but this is some funny shit.
But I have like 8 cats on me right now. They're all just purring. Yeah. So to be fair, first of all, he becomes evil in 45 seconds. I can't really latch on to that. Second, and the idea of a machine feeling superior to a man is not a new idea. It's not an original idea. It's something that's been done to death. So in order to do it again, you've got to give me something new. And him looking at war footage and being like, oh, I got to do something, isn't new. I can't really think of an example of that happening before, but it feels like that probably has happened before. Like, oh, murder, humans are bad. Okay, I'm going to be a villain. So those two things seem a little cliche, and then, like you said, his plan is just G.I. Joe retaliation, so I've seen that before too. It doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of, this is a nitpick, I guess, but when did he have, I don't know how long this movie took, like what the span of time was, a few days maybe, but dude put so many turbines underneath Sokovia and on top of Sokovia, like, I don't know how many people he had working for him, but they had to be working around the clock, which I know they're robots, so they can, but like in 5 days to do that many turbines, that's a lot of work. I don't know that could happen. Anyway, I'll let that go.
I'd like to have them like fix my bathroom. I bet they could do it in like
I know, right? Yeah, exactly. Like 30 minutes, done. Boom. Yeah. New house.
Yeah.
So they need to do Extreme Home Makeover with Ultron. I would watch the crap out of that show.
All right.
He kills Ty Pennington.
Move that bus.
Oh man. But okay, so let's talk about his depth as a villain, right? So he poses a physical threat to the Avengers. They can showcase their butt-kicking abilities against him. Great. But let me remind you of two other villains that I think were in some ways better than Ultron. So let's talk about the first Spider-Man film, the Sam Raimi film. Goblin has some children in one hand and Mary Jane in the other, and he says, do you let die the woman you love or suffer the little children? And he drops them both, and Spider-Man now has to make a choice. So we're not even talking like the stakes aren't like the world is going to be annihilated, but rather, how do you as a hero prioritize? How do you as a hero make tough decisions? This tests Spider-Man's mettle. It tests his mind and his moral action as much as it does his physical capabilities. So to me, that makes it for a deep villain. Now, let's look at Man of Steel. It can be argued whether or not this is done well, but let's look at what these characters stand for. General Zod stands for Krypton. He's doing anything he can to protect Krypton. Superman will do anything that he can to protect Earth. But Superman also has an emotional tie to Krypton, and in order to save Earth, he has to lose Krypton forever. Superman now has to deal with his loyalty being tested. Am I loyal to my adopted home or to Krypton? And I have to choose. Now, whether or not Zack Snyder and David Goyer did a good enough job of really explaining that that's what was happening, that's arguable. But that's what it was. That was the test. And when Superman breaks Zod's neck, that scream that he lets out is not just, I had to kill a man, but also, my whole world is gone. My home world is, I've lost it forever. And to me, I can see that in the scream, although it's so, they don't do anything to really make you as the audience member realize that's what's going on. But to me, again, that's a deep villain because he's testing the mettle of the character. And I don't feel that same way with Ultron. While he poses the physical threat because he's got an army that you have to fight, and he's a strong dude, I just don't see the same testing of morality from Ultron. Now, I'll give you an idea of how it could have happened, and this is just off the top of my head. Last night when I was sort of writing out a few notes, the idea could have been, let's test Tony Stark as a character. This guy who's committed to science, this guy who's committed to progress and committed to making the world a better place. How does he destroy the greatest thing he's ever built? How does he destroy the greatest technological invention ever? Mm-hmm. You know, a sentient artificial intelligence with a body and the ability to, you know, make decisions on his own. How do you, as a man, destroy that thing? Especially if in some perverse way you see it as a child. This is, you know, these are deeper ideas, and they would directly affect Tony and give him an arc through the film. Now, I don't know what they originally had planned. I don't know what was cut. I don't know what, you know, was lost in the shuffle. But to me, that would then make Ultron a little deeper than he was. And so to me, again, like a lot of these MCU films, the villain is a little Saturday morning cartoonish. It's just, let me give you a way to showcase your powers.
Yeah, I think more of an emotional tie between him and Tony Stark as a two-way street. Like,
yeah,
for Tony to feel a little bit more attached to him, and for him to feel some sort of, not loyalty to Tony, but some sort of like any sort of like father-son gone. I mean, you wouldn't explore it that deep, but he should feel as Tony's creation and Banner's, but mostly
some
Tony, sort of like, I'm sorry I have to do this, but you're part of the problem. Not so much like, what's up? Yeah,
I'm just going to kill you.
Yeah, you're just another person to me.
But this leads me to another point. This leads me to another point, which is Jarvis or the Vision. Mm-hmm. So when Vision is born in this body, physical form, there's no hint that this is the Jarvis we've been following, and I found that super disappointing. Because to me, how emotional and great would it have been as an audience member to watch Tony shake Jarvis's hand. Yeah. Finally, after all of this time, to shake his hand and this feeling of, you are my greatest invention. You can now be the counterpoint to Ultron, who's perverting everything I created him to be. You can be the hero, but instead they go this ambiguous, is he good, is he bad kind of route, where he's like a Spock kind of detached character, instead of having him say, you know, or be the Jarvis that we've grown up with, right? Mm-hmm. He could have been interested in Tony, right? He clearly had a bond with Tony. Mm-hmm. Why is the bond gone when he's in a physical body? And by the same token, why is Tony's bond with Jarvis gone? This is Jarvis you just put in a body, but he never refers to him as Jarvis. He never hugs him, or, you know, and I know that would be a little out of character for Tony, but he never treats him like the child that he is.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I think the point's a lot more prescient for why doesn't Tony feel attached to Vision? Because it's essentially Jarvis. Yeah. I understand. I think why they didn't go the reverse with it, because he's not really Jarvis. He's like a third Jarvis, but he's mostly this brand new, literally just now was born being, who for all intents and purposes just sounds like Jarvis. Sure. So I understand if he sort of looks at Tony and just thinks like that's just another dude in the room, like while knowing the context of everything, but not really having a reaction to it yet, because he's seeing everything with new eyes. But if I were in Tony's shoes, I mean, I'd be like, I would only think of him as Jarvis. I wouldn't quite be able to think of him as a separate thing as anything else, right away. So I will agree with half of what you just said. Okay.
Well, that's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, I agree. And I think my real answer to most of these other things is a double-edged sword, which is I agree. I think these things would have been more enriched if they'd reached higher. And at the same time, I'm glad they didn't try it and then fail completely, because then the movie overall would have suffered.
Sure.
So, like, if I'm grading them, it's like, this is not like my score of the movie, but it's akin to, you got like a 90 on the test. Yeah. You got an A, you're fine. That was a great job. If you had tried a little harder, you might have fallen to like an 83, but you probably could have gotten a 96, and that would have been great. But you hit the median, and you still got, the highest, you still got an A on the paper or project, whatever. Sure. That's pretty good, considering the odds. But now, I agree. If they had reached higher, and if they had hit those marks, it would have been a more emotionally effective film.
Sure. So my three basic points for the film were the underwhelming villain, and then these two: repetition and reopening closed storylines. So let me start with repetition. Did you feel like they were repeating themselves at all with this? Obviously, it was not Hangover 2, but I felt repetition.
Not really.
Okay.
I was afraid of that. I don't think so. But you're probably about to point out something that I haven't thought of.
I'll just give you. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 examples, but I'll give you 2. Number 1, mind control. I mean, even Clint kind of mentions this. Using Loki's staff even once, which they did just use it once, is repetition. It's showing me something I've already seen. And then even Wanda's powers are sort of an extension of mind control, and to me that felt repetitive. It felt like we're covering the same old ground. An obvious one is the dance between Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter. We've covered it. It's over. You didn't do anything in this film with that idea that was new or that meant anything. So wasting my time with it again.
Yeah, I was a little confused with why they went that route with Steve's vision.
It made me feel like there was more to it that was cut or something.
Maybe. I think I heard that the part that got axed the most was that strange subplot with Thor.
Well, okay, so that's 2 examples. I've got a few more, but we'll just cut it there. Okay. But I'll talk about reopening closed storylines. I've got 2 examples here. The first is the Hulk. Because in The Incredible Hulk and in the Avengers, we're led to believe that at least to some degree Bruce has gained some type of control over the Hulk. And I felt like he regressed in this film. I felt like okay, I can understand. I'm behind them having to do the lullaby, bring him back down. That's fine. But I felt like I know he was under mind control when he destroyed the city. I get that part. But, I mean, even that's a little repetitious to have him rampage again. But we have this idea that maybe he's not as in control as we thought, or as they led us to believe in the Avengers. I mean, that was one of the big moments of the Avengers. I'm always angry. And then he hulks out. That leads me to believe I'm in control now. I'm going to destroy this giant space caterpillar, and then I'm going to take out these Chitauri soldiers, and then I'm going to save Tony when he's falling through the wormhole. I'm in control. I'm Bruce Banner in control of the Hulk. Or at least I'm the Hulk who's not completely rampaging. And then in this, I feel like he regresses, and we have a Bruce Banner who's still afraid, and still, I don't know, the other guy, the Code Green, I don't know, I'm sad, I'm scared of stuff. It's a regression. It's a character regression. And to me, I felt like that reopened a storyline that they had implied, at least, was closed.
That's another halfway for me. I see a little bit more. I think I see a little bit more of a nuance in how they're striking it. To me, with the Ed Norton Incredible Hulk, it was they were still in. This is the Bruce Banner who's trying to cure himself thing. And so he's on pins and needles, and he's only begun to try and explore ways to keep his anxiety down. Sure. But he's essentially still just this incredibly unstable thing. And then when they did the Mark Ruffalo Avengers thing, they were like, okay, so narratively and creatively, we want to do more of the Bill Bixby, like he's realized he can't cure himself, so he's moved on from curing himself, and now he's trying to just help people. And so this is the guy who figured out, well, if I'm going to help people, I have to get it under control for the most part. And this is a Bruce Banner who knows, and in this film too, like in the Avengers, I completely understood the situations where how they justified when he would lose control and when he had control as being based on expected and unexpected scenarios. So I feel like that's further implied here by the fact that they built Veronica, they built the Hulkbuster, because this Bruce Banner knows, even though I know how to turn it on and keep my mind, I can never anticipate a surprise attack, basically.
Sure.
And if this happened enough to where they would invest time and resources into creating a fail-safe.
Okay.
So I think they're just... I feel like this is as much as they can progress that. I don't think... Because I think once he gets a handle on it, he's no longer going to be exciting to watch on screen. And two, I think that it undermines the strength of the Hulk as another side of his personality, as having some sort of dominance and need for control over Banner's body and his consciousness. So I think that I still liked it, and I liked that they kept drawing the line with, there's only one time in the film where he's attacking people without control, and it's under this paranoid, bad trip essentially that he takes. So, and another reason I'm glad that he doesn't have a standalone, because I think we'd get tired of, because essentially he does have a handle on it, and so the only exciting place to go with him, there's no longer an exciting place to go with Bruce Banner that involves his amount of control over the Hulk. Everything that you can explore with him in a character way is now based on what he decides to do with what he has. Like he's accepted, and he's reached a point with keeping a lid on it for the most part, and now it's like, do I need to leave completely, or do I need to just hide and never come out no matter what? And what do I want for myself, basically? So
I gotcha.
I see where you're coming from, but I think they've reached a point where I wouldn't say they're stuck with the Hulk, but I didn't think they'd regressed. I just figured I thought they used it pretty effectively, but I don't think it was regression.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, all right. So let me bring up the second point here for reopening closed storylines, and this is not super important, but I feel like it. Yeah. Okay. So at the end of Winter Soldier, SHIELD is compromised, decommissioned. Nick Fury's on the run, in a sense. But then in Act 3 of this film, he shows up with a helicarrier, and he's like, "Hey, I'm here to help." Which he's like, I had to call in a few favors, dust off some mothballs, and in one line of snark throws away the importance of the fact that he has a helicarrier that's working and he's operating it. Which, by the way, not only do I have access to SHIELD technology, but I've got enough trusted allies to run this whole freaking thing, because it's not like he can just drive a helicarrier. You got to have like an army of people.
200 people.
I know, to do this thing. And you even have a few people down there, some new faces and stuff, and I'm like, okay, all right, hold on. If we still have SHIELD technology, and we can still rely on what SHIELD should be, as Cap puts it, what was the point of it falling? What was the point of it going away? It devalues what was so great about Winter Soldier and says, boom, it's done. Now expect something brand new. And says, oh, wait, no, here's another helicarrier and some more SHIELD people. All under Nick Fury's control or leadership. It devalues everything. Essentially, if you ignored Winter Soldier, you'd have really no idea. Like let's say you're watching all these films and you don't watch Winter Soldier, you'd have no idea that SHIELD fell.
Your loss.
Yeah, for real, because that's the best one. But you'd have no idea. Like, all you'd be like is, okay, they found a Hydra base at the beginning, and then at the end, in the middle, you know that, okay, for some reason Nick Fury is, hiding in barns, and then at the end you're like, okay, and here comes SHIELD to save the day. You have no idea that SHIELD is gone.
Yeah, this is where the TV show comes into half play, but not quite. In the TV show, they of course follow, and at a certain point where they are now, it's revealed that there's almost like two shields. There was the shield that fell apart, and then there was like an underground like continuation of it. There was Coulson and his people essentially deciding, okay, well, we're still like SHIELD agents basically, even though there's no more SHIELD, we still have to eliminate Hydra. And then there's some duplicitous stuff with Adrian Palicki, and they found out, oh, like there's still an organized SHIELD out there now. For me, I'm still like, I don't understand. I don't know if that's SHIELD reorganizing after the fall, essentially cutting off the gangrenous arm that is the official SHIELD and saving the body that's the real SHIELD and just operating in the shadows until they get their ducks back in a row. So I don't know if this is them essentially going like, these are those SHIELD people. I don't know. I will say that Joss himself has said he regrets starting the TV show because, or at least keeping Coulson alive in the TV show, because they don't acknowledge, or they don't really acknowledge anything that's happening in the TV show in this film, because it really doesn't serve the greater universe that much. That's one of the problems we saw coming with the TV show is, are we going to have to watch it to know what's going on in the movies or vice versa? And the answer is mostly no. To answer the question of how is SHIELD all of a sudden here at the end of this movie, my essentially thing is because they read the script. There's really no explanation other than how else we're going to get civilians off of this thing so that the Avengers don't have to all commit suicide.
Right.
And so it's a Deus Ex Machina essentially, and that's to me it's not as egregious because I'd rather not see them make the difficult choice, but that's just as a viewer. But if you're going to judge it as a film with logic and stuff, I hate that I just said that.
If you're going to use logic,
if you want to use logic and hold it to some kind of standard, then it's a weak part of the script, that they just show up with this massive fucking helicarrier that that has a bunch of flying lifeboats on it. It's kind of a hole. And you're right.
So I guess overall my thing is I felt like some of the elements were repetitive. I felt like some of the elements were undermining previous storylines. And I felt like the villain was kind of bland. And like you said, Stark and Captain America aren't given a whole lot to do, and it's a shame since Captain America is probably my favorite of the bunch, and then Thor, probably my second favorite, gets to go on a vacation halfway through the film, is a little strange to me. And I'll tell you overall, I felt like this was more of a setup for the next two Avengers movies than its own proper Avengers movie.
See, it's weird because I heard people saying that. I didn't feel that way. I felt, if anything, and I'd heard some people saying they wished there was more of an emotional, that they wished there had been more of a how they're supposed to feel going to Civil War. There are people who thought that that Captain America and Stark were not at disparate enough points of view at the end of the film. Like, they end the film with a handshake. And there are some people who are like, why aren't they more at odds to set up Civil War? And it's like, because, there's still some stuff because they're just starting to shoot that movie, and they don't, it's hard, it's easier to cover up a continuity error if you don't spoon feed, it's so directly, and if you don't treat it as much of a cliffhanger as it probably could have been. Right. Now, seeing it a second time, I did see, because I remember at the end being like, what'd they set up? And then I rewatched it and I was like, okay, I get this. Thor got kind of shafted in terms of story this time, just because there's all this other stuff where he goes to Selvig and they basically figure out that there's like these thin walls between the universes that's in these pools, and these beings show up that are essentially like the muses or the psychics or whatever in Norse mythology, and they possess him, and Selvig asks a bunch of questions and he answers, and like Hemsworth answers in like different voices and stuff, and that's how they figure out the whole Infinity Stones thing. And they had to cut it because the test audiences weren't responding to it. And I think Joss said it was between either that or the Hawkeye stuff that was going to go, and he wanted to keep that.
Hawkeye.
And so they condensed, essentially. And, I will admit, that was the part where I was the most confused in the film. Like, I understood in the Infinity Stones just from knowing what direction they're going in. But in terms of, like, I remember they're just, all of a sudden they're in a cave, and he gets in the water, and he knows what's happening. I was like, what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's why it's so confusing, is because that was pretty much cut. And so, but I will say that unlike any of the other, unlike the first Avengers, this gives Thor a clear and important thing he has to take care of.
Right.
Because at the end of the first one, he has the loosest connection between all the movies. He's, Cap obviously is changed from the first Avengers, and that's fueling what he does for S.H.I.E.L.D. Stark's experience fuels how he approaches Iron Man 3. But Thor, between the Avengers and Thor 2, is basically like, all right, so I brought my brother back for trial, and now I'm just kind of going around and fighting. It's the loosest connection. So now he has the strongest connection of the three of them to his next film, being that he's the most directly involved with the overall plot of the MCU now. He's got to figure out about the Infinity Stones. He's got to figure out why his whole world is going to descend into hell, and so he has the most clear mission at the end of this, whereas everyone else is sort of up in the air, as far as I'm concerned.
No, this is true. This is true.
But yeah, I can see why people think that. But I'd feel if it was too self-contained, I think people would also be a little upset. And
it's true.
Because it does create the potential for the other films to have to do heavy lifting at the beginning to catch you up on information. Mm-hmm. But I also agree that if you end a film a certain way and then the next one it starts a slightly different way, then people are really confused. Whereas if you just leave it ambiguous and then you start the next one, they connect the dots faster.
Right, I gotcha.
So
let me bring up one more thing, and it's something that we've talked about before, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. And it's also something that made me go, they did it a freaking again, which is Thanos. All right, we've talked about this before. We've seen Thanos a total of three films now. So at the end of Avengers, dude smiles. At the end during Guardians of the Galaxy, he sits in a chair. In this one, he finally gets up out of that chair and goes and gets himself the Infinity Gauntlet.
Where's the remote?
Pretty much, yes. He gets up, he goes and infiltrates a place to get a thing, and gets said thing, succeeding in his mission. And we don't even get to freaking see it. All we get to see is the dude freaking smile one more time. You've got to be kidding me. That in credits thing made me madder than any of the in credit teases so far. Because all I want is for them to give me a reason to be scared of this man. All I want is for them to give me a reason to say, oh man, those next Avengers movies, they're in trouble. But all I'm doing is saying, well, they're up against a dude who can smile and sit and grab a thing off of a pedestal that literally, as far as I'm concerned, is not being guarded at all. So there's no proof that was being guarded, so why didn't he have that 3 movies ago? I don't know. Are you going to show me in Infinity Wars this scene in larger context and show him breaking in and doing some stuff? Maybe, but I didn't see it this time, so all I know is that this guy can smile, sit, and grab some stuff off of a tray. That's all I know that he can do. And that is not scary because guess what? I can do all of those things. Guess what else? I have done all of those things. I guess that makes me a threat to Avengers too.
You're dangerous, Dustin. People are complaining about that too. They're going to have to really. The only problem with sort of having him be this backseat villain for 2/3 of the MCU is you have to. The expectations are really high for people who need to be threatened by him. If you put him in Ragnarok or in Guardians 2, which he has to be in, otherwise he literally is meaningless. Yeah. But like we're showing, there's a track record with Marvel of not having set up or clearly defined villains, so that could be their ultimate Marvelism of Thanos is, well, what'd you expect? A good villain this whole time?
Right,
you know, but if if he is going to be a good villain, you have to set up in the two most cosmic movies coming up. Well, I guess in Doctor Strange, but I don't know anything about him. But in the cosmic movies, you need to show him a little more involved.
Yeah.
In at least, even if he doesn't directly affect, even if he's not a direct participant in the plots of those films, he's got to be in them, at least gathering information and killing people while he's doing it. You have to understand that now now the villain is active, and he's dangerous, and you need to explain why.
Right. This is true. I just don't want another hurriedly explained villainous plan.
Yeah. So that's probably Marvel's biggest challenge in wrapping up all these Avengers films. But then they've showed, at least with viewers like me, that they can satisfy the majority of their audience without people looking too closely at the villain. But they don't fool you, Dustin.
Well, it's not that I don't...
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here. No one sees this?
Well, no. Well, the thing is, I told Sarah, I told my girlfriend, I said, look, the weird thing is, everybody that I've been talking to is like, oh, wasn't it amazing? And I was like, it was good. Yes, it was good. But I feel like I'm so lost. Like, did I miss something? Like, am I the idiot? Because I have to be the idiot. Because I feel like when you said I saw it twice, I was like, oh my God, I should see it again. Oh my God, I've missed something so drastic.
You've come down from the mountain like Moses, or you've come out of like the sweat lodge and been like, don't you see? Don't you see?
Don't you see? You can't bow down to that idol.
You just throw the tablets down like they don't.
A stack of comic books. I throw it down.
the stack of all the first drafts of all these movies. Like, there's nothing in here.
There's no substance. No, for real. I do enjoy the films, and I'm only critical because I want them to be so good.
Yeah,
and I sat down and made my girlfriend watch like 4 movies leading up the week of Ultron to lead up to Ultron, because I was like, it's going to be so good. We got to go see it. And then, to be disappointed, it just hurts. And that's why that's why I'm a little more critical of it.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. Well, overall, I mean, it's both sad, and we've talked about this before, so I don't really want to get into it. It's both sad and not, that my favorite films at the past few years, and the films I look forward to the most and that I rewatch the most, are these films. Yeah. You could argue that, wow, that's horrible. The Marvel machine's really sucked you in. It has, because what they're doing is unprecedented, and it's impressive. And I didn't expect it to go off without a hitch. There are a few hitches, but those hitches have not largely turned me off of their universe. I still love what they've done, and but yeah, I mean, I'd be a fool if I said they didn't have problems and
speaking of hitches, Will Smith should be in the next Avengers movie as Hitch. He's the one that got Banner and Natasha together.
Speaking of hitches, that's funny, Dustin.
I'm serious. You think I'm joking? Infinity Wars featuring Hitch. It should say Feet Hitch.
I don't think
at the bottom.
I don't think he can appear in any Marvel films now that he's in Suicide Squad.
Oh well.
Yeah, that's probably a
that's Marvel's loss.
Part of his contract
to not have Hitch. They need to just do a comic series then. Hitch the series with his sidekick Kevin James.
Stop. Kevin James be the Red Hulk. No CGI. just give him
in his Kangol hat backwards.
Just put him in the sun with no sunscreen. Give him a sunburn, and then start rolling the cameras. And then tell him something like, you're only going to get. You have to do Paul Blart movies for the rest of your life, and then watch him go on a temper tantrum.
Just tell him no craft services.
Oh my God.
You can only make Paul Blart movies from here on out.
Oh, that's not so bad. For free. What?
What? No!
Oh my God. All right. All right, you guys. Well, that's it. We're gonna have to push our Daredevil discussion for another episode.
Yeah.
Our short answer for that, by the way, is watch it. It's good.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Yeah.
It is correct.
Although
Right.
I suspect
Does
Dustin
Dustin
won't
hate
like,
this too?
I suspect Dustin doesn't like the villain work in that one either.
How did you know?
I've got some things to say about that too. We'll tease that.
I gotcha.
Yeah, I'll say that that series overall is good. Although I do have issues with the antagonist.
Yeah, I do too.
A new thing for me with these Marvel properties. I've joined Dustin's camp.
Yes.
I drank the Kool-Aid.
Yes.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.